Okay, namaste, good evening to all. And on behalf of Indian section, I welcome all of you to today's session. Let us begin this session with the universal prayer. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. So today, Brother Shikhar Agnihotri will continue the study of chronological letter number 11. I request Brother Shikharji to begin, please.
Thank you, Sister Vipaji, and happy greetings and good wishes to all. Namaste, good afternoon, good evening. And I would like to do the invocation also of the Guru Tattva. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Also, let us send our good wishes to all those people, theosophists, senior theosophists who have passed to peace, leaving their physical body. May all of them pass into light and peace, and their onward journey be smooth. And they give their blessings to us. As you're aware that we have been continuing this letter number 11 from last time, and today, since Sister Meenakshi is not with us, so I will also be doing the Hindi part at the end of the talk. And as you know, that this letter from the Master is the response, in response to the letter from Mr. A. Hume, that were a couple of letters that were sent by him, and the things that the Mahatma, the Master, has replied in this, and even quoted some of the things from Mr. A. Hume's letter. You can only imagine the attitude, the wordings, or the intentions with which that letter might have been written by Mr. A. Hume. So, and that is why in the last letter we came to this point that Mr. A. Hume was talking, might have talked to the Mahatma about morality, about choosing the bad means to arrive at good ends, or to use the good ends using the bad means, and on which we'll come later. So in that continuation, the Master said that the conception of morality in general relates first of all to the object or motive, and this is very important thing we keep studying in theosophy, that the binding power of karma is also in the motive. That with what motive an action is being done, with the selfish motive or selfless motive or revenge or help or whatever it is, that decides the consequences. Of course, the consequences will be at various levels, but the motive plays a strong part. And he very rightly says that they don't call that person a moral person. He's giving two examples or two ways that how can you call that person a moral who is following the rule of a famous religious schemer or a scammer who uses bad means for a good object. How much less would we call him moral who uses seemingly good and noble means to achieve a decidedly wicked or contemptible object? This the Mahatma is saying to Mr. A. Hume, who even he was completely disbelieving all these phenomena and all the evidences, unimpeachable evidences given by Madame Blavatsky, which convinced A P Sinnet, but A.O. Hume was not yet convinced. And although he felt a bit of scorn or negative feeling towards HPB, but in the last part, he said that he promised her his unalterable friendship. But in the long run, his motive was to harm Theosophical Society and HPB, and maybe take over the whole Theosophical Society, as we know that there was a proposal by him in the executive committee that all these people, the T. Subbarao, HPB, Chronological, they all should resign and he should be made in charge, which was, of course, completely opposed by the other Theosophists. So the Mahatma is saying about that according to him, his logic, Madame Blavatsky would be in the first category. That is, she is a scammer who is using this, the whole scheme of Mahatmas and everything to do something good, although she's doing the hoax. And I in the second, that is the Mahatma using the cover of the Theosophical Society for what? To lure the native Indians. And from this part, we can assume that this blame definitely might have been given by A.O. Hume to Master H, that the approbation of government, home government, which A.O. Hume might have said a very low motive, and to add to it the following crushing and direct accusation to Mahatma that you don't want this branch, the Anglo-Indian branch for TS work, but actually you want to lure your native brother, that is to bring Indians together or something. And a lot of other things which Mahatma says this is a direct and positive accusation. And he is trying to show the Mahatma as a guilty of the pursuit of a wicked, mean object through low and contemptible means. That is, the Theosophical Society and all these esoteric teachings is just a cover. The real purpose is something else. Then the Mahatma replies to this accusation that while writing all these things, did he even stop for a moment to think that this organization, projected organization, may have something grander and nobler and far more important aim than the mere gratification of the desire of one solitary person, that is himself. Namely, and what purpose could that be? What grander objective could that be? To promote the security and welfare of a whole conquered nation, that is India. So, what actually A.O. Hume is telling a low motive of making TS is basically what Master is saying is nothing but the anxious search for means which would be the salvation of a whole country ever distrusted and suspected, that is the protection by the conqueror of the conquered. So yes, Theosophical Society, and this gives us a hint that the destinies of the nations are not just what we see on the physical level. There are a lot of invisible forces that are playing the role behind the curtains. And I think you might all remember that Sri Aurobindo was a great freedom fighter. But while he was in the jail, he had a vision in which it was shown to him a lot of leaders coming, the freedom fighters coming after him, and who will ensure the freedom, independence of India. Then only he turned towards his, or emphasized his, or concentrated on his spiritual journey. So all these things give us the idea that the events happening, even the big events, whatever we call, they all are guided as per the divine plan, and of course, to a lot of degree, to alleviate the karma of the world, whether they are wars or whether they are other freedom of some revolutions, they are supported or obstructed by the invisible powers also. Mahatma says that A.O. Hume pride himself in not being a patriot, but he himself do not, because he says, and this is a very important uh, thing for all of us to understand, that he says in learning to love one's own country, one but learns to love humanity the more. And I often remember Colonel Kailash also. He's been a colonel in the army, and he often says, yes, love your country, but the love should not stop at the boundary. I mean, it should go beyond the boundaries also. As a soldier, someone has a duty to do, that's a different thing, but there is no point in developing or harboring a sense of hatred or enmity with somebody. Yes, if I have to protect something, we have to protect it as long as that duty, we consider it our duty. So that lack of that term, that is the patriotism, that low motives, Master says, that caused in 1857 my countrymen to be blown by yours. And we all remember the revolution of 1857, how it was derailed, and so many Indians were put to death by the Britishers. So he's saying, why then should I not fancy that a real philanthropist, which Mr. A.O. Hume considers himself to be, would regard the aspiration for a better understanding between the government and the people of India as a most commendable instead of an ignoble one, if he really is what he declares himself to be, then this would have been a perfect opportunity for him. And he says that A.O. Hume is saying that is fig, and a very small part of knowledge and philosophy on which this whole society is based, it would not be of any good to mankind, would not enable me to be more useful to my generation, that even if I get this knowledge, I may not be very useful to my generation. But when he is given this opportunity to work in the Anglo-Indian society, he just turned away and taunt the Mahatmas in return. So these are so many contradictions in his letter that Mahatma points out. And one more thing that he might have written, that the only reward or the approval, that the reward that to which I shall look will be, that is in earning my own self-approval, that whatever I think, if my conscience approves it, that is what I should do, and nothing else matters. But the self-approval, Mahatma says, which cares so little for what is going on in the better part of the world, discrimination, exploitation, and to which the good and noble deeds of one serve as high ideals and the most powerful stimulants to emulation, is little else than proud and arrogant egotism. Because then we are only looking for self-approval, that whatever I say, everybody should be in line with that. It is himself against all criticism, which he says in French, there is a statement like that. So, in a sarcastic way also, he says that I am gratified that I gave you so much options or moments to feel happy, namely in asking you to draft a general plan for the formation of Anglo-Indian branch. It looks like from this letter, the reply, that most likely in the letter Mahatmas might have asked A P Sinnet and A.O. Hume to make up a outline of the working of the Anglo-Indian society, which Mr. A.O. Hume might have misunderstood, that they are talking about the esoteric study plan. I mean, asking him to make up a plan for esoteric study, and he gave an example that It's like giving an ignorant boy to work out a very complex and difficult problem regarding the motion of a fluid inside another fluid, like it's fluid dynamics or fluid mechanics problem. But the Mahatma says that your comparison falls short of the mark. And actually, there the irony hits no one, although you are trying to be ironic, because his point was not at all asking Mr. Hume to set up an esoteric study program, but only the general plan and outward administration of the projected society, just like what Colonel Olcott did for Theosophical Society. And we all know that HPB brought Theosophy, and Colonel Olcott, it is said, made Theosophical Society. The administrative part, the constitution, the branches, and everything was done by him. And one of the essential conditions for the society was it should be a branch of universal brotherhood, not a school of magic. And most assuredly, Mahatma accepts this, that the purpose for this organization, Anglo-Indian branch, to be composed of Englishmen and who will meant to serve as a link between the British and the natives. And actually the condition, now we see how it is linked, how even Mahatma's vision was that they agreed to share this knowledge with the Britishers or in this society here, so that with this base of theosophy, the universal brotherhood, the natives and the Britishers, whoever prominent here are, they will come close, and then slowly it will build up a momentum, and this discrimination or the exploitation or the torture that was going on might come to an end. And why he asked A.O. Hume to do that? Because he clearly says that you English people are far more competent than we to draft a general plan. But what A.O. Hume misunderstood, that Mahatma is asking him for cooperation in the instructions to be given in the spiritual science, which is a most unfortunate quid pro quo. That is, there is a most unfortunate favor granted in return for something. But at the same time, Mr. Sinnet understood what Mahatma meant. And again, coming to that sentence regarding which Mahatma wrote to Mr. A P Sinnet not to misunderstand, that he says that in his letter, Mr. A. Hume wrote that not 1 in 10,000 native minds is as well prepared to realize and assimilate the transcendental truth as mine, because he thought of himself as a great intellectual person, worthy person. But Mahatma clearly says that among English men of science, there are not half a dozen, even those minds whose minds are more capable of receiving these rudiments of occult knowledge than yours. And you are mistaken to the natives. And then he says, the Hindu mind is preeminently open to the quick and clear perception of the most transcendental, the most abstruse metaphysical truths. And no wonder that the depth, the profoundness of the scriptures, the Vedanta, Upanishads, and I mean, we go on finding and dive deeper and deeper in those scriptures that we have in Sanatan Dharma, that only a mind who is, which is able to assimilate all this has to be a very advanced mind. And when he's saying Hindu mind, it's very easy to feel kind of pride or privileged, but I don't think Hindu by Hindu means religion Hindu, but basically any mind who is open and has an eager intellect. That's what in Veda says, let noble thoughts come to our mind from all directions. But the moment and that's why you see, there is so much diversity in Hinduism. Even there is a branch which does not believe in God. Nastik also, Charvak system also is there. The Saguna, Nirguna, Sakar, Nirakar, even Sakar, there are millions of Devis, Devtas. The same family members can worship different gods and goddesses. So there is freedom, there is diversity, but there is also the underlying unity which binds all. So the mind that can really assimilate these fundamentals is, okay, in this instance, he said a Hindu mind, which is difficult for others to understand, where they are told that there is this one book which you have to follow, irrespective of anything. You cannot question anything. If you question, it is a sin, or the different, all those things that we know. But the question is that, again, we have to understand what we consider Hinduism, whether just a rituals or ceremonies, or we want to go deeper than that. And he says the example that some of the most unlettered ones, like those who are not even literate, even at a glance, they will perceive, which often would escape the best Western metaphysician. And we have people, I mean, Kabir, Sant Raidas, and even others. And that is the difference between the working of the mind and the working of intuition. Normally, it is thought that because the Western psychology is based on basically the working of mind, for them, the mind is the ultimate tool to learn. But in Eastern philosophy, the ultimate tool to learn is intuition, by direct perception, by being one with the object. So when there is no duality, that is the best way to learn, because the mind gets the vibrations from the senses, gets many images, then collects the images, and then draws a conclusion, which can be faulty because they may be colored with prejudices and conditionings. And intuition, in that matter, there is no such barrier. And that's why he says, you may be, and most assuredly are our superiors in every branch of physical knowledge. In spiritual science, we were, are, and always will be your masters. And it does not mean that there are no masters in the Western civilization, but of course, most of this knowledge, the source, if we come to know, is from the Eastern influence. Even people say that Jesus came into the White Brotherhood to take that knowledge. Even Pythagoras and the Greek mythology, the Egyptians and pagans, all of them took it from this, what earlier was called mysteries, or one common wisdom religion. Then he comes to the charity. That what can I, a half-civilized native, think of the charity, modesty, and kindness of one belonging to a superior race, one whom I know as noble-minded, just, and kind-hearted man in most circumstances of his life, when with an ill-disguised scorn he exclaims, and this is, he's talking about Mr. A. Hume, who declared himself, considered himself to be a very charitable, modest, and kind person who loves humanity and who wants to work. And he even say that if his knowledge does not help humanity, he will, leave the knowledge itself. And he says, Mr. Hume, that then if you want people to follow you blindfold, heedless of ulterior results, the consequences, then stick to your Alcotts, because he considered himself superior to Colonel Alcott or HPB. And he says, if you want men of a higher class whose brains are to work effectually in your cause, remember, and something. So Mahatma clears that my dear sir, we neither want people to rush on blindfold, and nor are we prepared to abandon tried friends. Now we are coming to some parts of the letter which gives us small hints that what actually matters on the spiritual path. What are those qualifications? Yes, we read in all the books, but what small things are those which in our day-to-day life we do in our nature, which are part of our nature, which decides our movement or our journey in this path. Mahatma is saying we are not ready to abandon those friends who would rather pass for fools than reveal what they may have learned under a soulman pledge of never revealing it unless permitted. On the other hand, we sometimes we try to get recognition. If something is happening, some people don't know, then if I know, then I want to show that I know. But what Mahatma is saying, who would rather pass for fools, that since they know something, but they have taken the pledge not to open it in front of everyone, they will keep their mouth shut, even if the majority thinks they are fool. For them, thought like a fool or look at like a fool does not matter as long as they are keeping their pledge. That is important in the eyes of the Guru or the Mahatmas. Even for the chance of getting men of very highest class. It is like when suppose somebody was poor or having lack of resources, there were some strong friends who supported, and when that person became rich in material sense, then he forgot his earlier friends, made new ones. But we all know that a friend in need is a friend indeed. So that's what the Mahatma is clarifying. What he really wants, we want true and unselfish hearts, fearless and confiding souls, and are quite willing to leave the men of the higher class and far higher intellects to grope their way to the light. Such will only look upon us as subordinates. I think it is very self-explanatory what is expected of a person walking this path. And he very clearly says that I believe that all these references that he has quoted from Mr. Hume's letter, it very clearly shows that their relationship is nowhere near to cordial, because Mr. Hume shows a spirit of fierce combativeness and a desire to fight shadows evoked by your own imagination. That happens very often. And I think we discussed it in the past also, that we, based on our conditioning and prejudices or our way of thinking, we give motives to other people that he or she did that, so because this is the reason behind that. And then we build up a whole story fighting that imagination, how to take revenge and all the rest of it. But it's basically fighting the shadows evoked by our own imagination. We go next. And there is a mention that he says, in your letter, you show plainly that you are the beginning, the middle, and the end of law to yourself. Then why trouble yourself to write me at all? Even that which you call a Parthian arrow was never meant as such. So basically, Mahatma is saying, since you are so full of yourself, you are everything, you think you are the perfectly right you in everything, then why do you want to write to me at all? And he might have said something about the Parthian arrow. Parthian arrow is something that the arrows, when one party is running away from the enemy, you see the one is chasing, the other is running ahead. So the rider somehow turns, twists, and fires on the backside. While the horse is running in one direction, the rider turns back, twist from the waist, and then fires the arrow. So while retreating from the enemy, they fire it. like a gorilla war. But the masters clarify it is not so. And it is not him who, unable to get the absolute, will depreciate or undervalue the relative good. And the example he gives that your little birds, because Hume was an ornithologist, he used to study birds. He says, yes, no doubt that you believe that the study of birds is doing a lot of good. And I would certainly never dream of giving offense by my remark that the human race and its welfare are equally noble study, and the latter as desirable an occupation as ornithology. So, because he thought he was doing a great work by studying of the book, so Mahatma says that's okay. But studying of human race and is also at, if not less, if not more, it's not less also. So, I'm not quite sure that your parting remark as to our not being invulnerable, that is, being vulnerable as a body, is quite free of that spirit which animated the retreating Parthians. Basically, he was, while ending his letter, he was just, giving some more additional uh, taunts or blames to the Mahatma's approach. And then Mahatma writes, be it as it may, that let it be whatever it is, we are content to live as we do, unknown and undisturbed by a civilization which rests so exclusively upon intellect. That in the civilization in which intellect is everything, and nor do we feel in any way concerned about the revival of our ancient arts and high civilization, which he's saying that maybe A.O. Hume, as he thought that the masters are very eager and anxious to, share their knowledge with the world. But he's saying, no, nothing of that sort, because these are sure to come back in their time and in a higher form. Because why? Because they say we have the weakness to believe in ever recurrent cycles and hope to quicken the resurrection of what is past and gone. Because the nature is not linear, it is cyclic. So everything that has gone past is sure to return. Be it, he gives the example of plesiosaurus or megatherium, which were like big giant marine reptiles or great beasts in the past, and they will also come back sometime in the future. And I think that's what happens. There are many science fiction movies in which they show how, due to the misadventures of human race playing with the nature, some virus, some animals, some things, because the seeds of everything are still on this earth. And from time and again, when the cycle comes, all these things come back to life. So that's what the master is saying. These cycles, we believe. We have the weakness to believe. And we could not impede it even if we would. They will come. These cycles will come and bring the old things in the present. But we have to leave the eternal law to take its own course and to have our dead ones come out of their graves. So even the Mahatmas, they can just guide the things in the limit of the law of karma, not interfere with it too much. And that's why there are some of the occult laws that we think that in the last quarter of every century, there is an effort by the brotherhood to give some push to the spiritual upliftment. And so there may be different other approaches also. Yet we are certainly anxious to hasten the welcome event within the limits of karma. Fear not, although we do cling superstitiously to the relics of the past, our knowledge will not pass away from the sight of the man. Why? Because it is the gift of the gods. And the most precious relic of all, we can name it also theosophy, the divine knowledge of the gods, divine wisdom. The keepers of this sacred light did not safely cross so many ages, but to find themselves wrecked on the rocks of modern skepticism. They say that this brotherhood of theirs, it is there since time immemorial. They have passed for so many times, not just to get ended due to the modern skepticism, because just because intellect is evolving right now, it does not mean the end of the Brahma Vidya. Why? Because our pilots, our sailors are too experienced to allow us to fear any such disaster, because we will always find volunteers to replace the tired sentries, and the world, bad as it is in its present state of transitory period, can yet furnish us with a few men now and then. And we keep seeing that in the history, that every now and then when something is totally hopeless, there is someone who comes and then brings about a change, and then there is a next one and next one and next one. So that's how this thing, the link is kept unbroken with what HPV said. And Mahatma said that we have done our duty. You wrote the letter to us, we have replied to, but now we will take no further step. Because he also said that we have studied the Kant's moral teachings and analyzed them. We have come to the conclusion that even his views on duty, which defines the methods of moral action, fall short of the full definition of an unconditional absolute principle of morality. Because this morality, what the Kant's morality as what he's talking about, which is the main note throughout his letter, it says it falls short of the unconditional impartial nature principle, because he says, A.O. Hume, that you so love mankind that were not your generation to be benefited, you would reject knowledge itself. And yet, this philanthropic approach, this philanthropy, sorry. Okay. Sorry. And yet this philanthropic feeling does not seem to inspire you with charity towards those you regard as of an inferior intelligence. Why? Because simply there is no character of universality in that morality, which is no morality at all. Because that is never having established on the firm footing of a moral universal principle, never having risen higher than the theoretical top, what the Mahatma is saying. The most superficial analysis will show that no more than any other empirical phenomena in human nature can it be taken as an absolute standard of moral activity. That is one productive of an efficient action. What he's saying again and again, that in human, if you study Kant's moral theory, it falls short of the universal character. So you are only moral to a point which suits or which is as per your conditionings. And this kind of philanthropy, which is unconditional, is like love, which is accidental or exceptional as per your understanding. And this, I think, this Mahatma says, this, I think, is the secret of spiritual failure and unconscious egotism of this age. And you, who is an otherwise good and wise man, being unconsciously to yourself the type of its spirit that you are, in essence, that spirit, your character is like that, you are unable to understand our ideas upon the society as a universal brotherhood, and hence you turn away your face from it, because you only want to learn this esoteric knowledge for yourself and maybe for your so-called humanity, but not for everyone. And that's why your conscious revolts, you say that I don't want to become a stalking horse with as a puppet who is controlled by some hidden wire pullers, that is the Mahatmas. But Mahatma says, you don't see us. How can you know us? That is a very strange argument. And do you really, how can you even know what are our aims and objects? Even if I come and stand in front of you, don't you think it's a strange argument? And he says that I am afraid that with no past experience of this kind, even with your nature, even with your natural powers of observation, however acute, would have to be confessed more than useless. Basically, he says, even if somebody comes in front of you, you would not be able to find a difference. And he said, even our Behrupiyas, like who take different troops, can prove a match any day for the acutest political resident. That you wouldn't be able to make a difference. Or even there were before, which who were not detected. And even then, when their mesmeric powers are not of a highest order. And a very important point now he is bringing, that however suspicious you might ever feel about the details of the brooch, because that was the phenomena that was considered to be unimpeachable as per A P Sinnet, that HPB asked Mrs. Hume to think of an object and she thought of a brooch, and then she took out from the pillow or from some place. There is, so Mr. Hume thinks also that the reason, if it is not a magic, the only reason that can be accounted for the theory of a stronger will influencing Mrs. Hume to think after that particular object and no other, which is what sometimes happens. And many times somebody asks, in a trick to pull out a card, play cards, and or think of a number, and we think of a number, and the person, if he's really genuine person, not doing some other tricks, fake thing, and the person tells the numbers or the card, the reason, the theory behind it, that person actually impressed that number or that card in your mind, and then you choose that number or card, and then for him it is very easy to tell what that number or card is. And so the Mahatma says that if Madam B, who was sick, can do that with Mrs. Hume, are you quite sure that you yourself would not also be made to succumb to a trained will, which is 10 times stronger than HPV's? I mean, imagine if Mrs. Hume, it can be done to Mrs. Hume by HPV. Imagine me, whose power is much more than hers. I could come to you tomorrow and I will stay in your house as invited, and I will completely dominate your mind and body in 24 hours, and you will not be aware even for a moment, what sometimes we call hypnotism or mesmerism. Although I may be a good man, but what about someone else who is very upset due to your race doing so much torture on the native people and who wants to take revenge on you, who is the best representative of that race? So if the power of this mesmerism alone were employed, the power acquired with equally by the bad as well as by the good person. It is nothing to do with the spirituality. Even then, you can hardly escape the snares laid out for you. And he said that you are a very easy subject. But then Mahatma says to Hume that then you will say, no, what about my conscience, my intuition, my willpower? So here is one more point. Mahatma says that your intuition would make you feel but that which really was for the time being. And as to your conscience, you then accept Kant's definition of it. What he says about conscience, that people think that there is a sure guide in his own inner moral conscience or perceptions. This is the greatest of the mistakes. Because with all the formidable importance of this moral factor, it has one radical defect. What is that? That conscience may tell us what we must not do, yet it never tells us what we should do or we ought to perform, nor gives any definite object to our activity. Because if we go back to some of the books, it's our earlier experiences, painful experiences, that makes the conscience. So conscience is not intuition. Conscience may tell us what not to do, but what is to be done can only be told by intuition. And conscience can be very easily lulled, put to sleep by even completely paralyzed with someone who has a trained will stronger than that of the other person. And your conscience will never show you whether the mesmerizer is a true adept or a very clever juggler, if only once he has passed through your aura and got control of your aura. So in the end, he says, you speak of abstaining from any but an innocent work like bird collecting before there be danger of creating another Frankenstein monster. Then he says, imagination as well as will creates. And suspicion is the most powerful provocative agent of imagination. Beware. So ultimately, it comes all down to our thinking, our approaches, basically the motive, the niyat, what we say in Urdu. What Mahatma says, that you have already begotten in you the germ of a future hideous monster. And instead of the realization of your purest and highest ideals, you may one day evoke a phantom which will stop all the passage of light, and you will remain in darkness, even more darkness than before, which will harass you to the end of your days, which normally happens that when our thinking is like that, that creates a shell around ourselves and we cannot perceive the light, and then we remain alone in that. And with this, we come to the end of this letter. Mahatma writes again, expressing the hope that my candor may not give offense. I am, dear sir, as ever, your most obedient servant, Kutumi Khalsa. So, in this लेटर हम लोगों ने देखा कि किस तरीके से महात्मा जो है वो एओ ह्यूम के लेटर को रिप्लाई कर रहे हैं, और उसमें एओ ह्यूम ने क्या क्या ब्लेम्स, क्या क्या चीजें नकारात्मक लिखी होंगी, जिनके बारे में महात्मा इतने डिटेल से विस्तार दे रहे हैं। पहला तो उन्होंने नैतिकता के बारे में बताया कि जो नैतिकता है, द कॉन्सेप्शन है, वो सबसे पहले हमारी नीयत पे डिपेंड करता है। और जिस प्रकार हम उस व्यक्ति को नैतिक नहीं बोल सकते जो कि अच्छे उद्देश्य के लिए गलत रास्ता अपनाता है, उसी प्रकार से कितना हम उसको तो बिल्कुल ही नहीं बोल सकते जो बुरे उद्देश्य के लिए अच्छा रास्ता अपनाता है। जैसा कि ह्यूम ने जानते हुए कि एचपीवी, जानते हुए नहीं, मानते हुए कि एचपीवी एक फेक पर्सन है और ये महात्मा या ये सब झूठ है, तब भी उन्होंने कहा कि मेरी मित्रता आपके साथ सदैव है, बल्कि लेकिन ऐसा था नहीं। वो बेसिकली वेट कर रहे थे अपॉर्चुनिटी का नुकसान पहुंचाने के लिए। पर ऐसे में उन्होंने कहा कि एचपीवी आप पहले उसमें रखते हैं कि एचपीवी अच्छा काम करना चाह रही हैं, लेकिन वो जो ये सब बना रही हैं लेटर्स और महात्माज, ये सब एक झूठ है, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है। और महात्मा वास्तव में वो एक गलत काम कर रहे हैं या उनका उद्देश्य बड़ा नीचे स्तर का है और उसके लिए वो एक अच्छा मार्ग अपना रहे हैं। और अच्छा मार्ग क्या है? इस एंग्लो इंडियन सोसाइटी को बनाना, जिसके माध्यम से वो ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई बहुत बड़ा मानव परमार्थ का या धर्म का कार्य करना चाहते हैं, बट बेसिकली वो देशवासियों को इकट्ठा करना चाहते हैं। ये वास्तव में कोई एक शैम है, मतलब कोई अच्छा चीज नहीं है, एक एक आवरण है, एक कवर है, और मेन उद्देश्य उसका दूसरा है। तो महात्मा कहते हैं उनसे कि क्या ये सब लिखते वक्त आपने एक बार भी सोचा कि ये जो संस्था बनने जा रही है उसका उद्देश्य बहुत ही महान है, और जिसको आप लो मोटिव कह रहे हैं वो बेसिकली एक टूल, एक इंस्ट्रूमेंट की खोज है, जिसके माध्यम से जो गलत हुआ या जो हुआ उसको सही किया जा सके। अर्थात जो भारत देश के साथ या भारत देश को जीता ब्रिटिशर्स ने, और जो इतना बीच में वैमनस्य है और जो टॉर्चर है, उसको खत्म किया जा सके। तो उसको अगर आप कह रहे हैं कि ये गलत मोटिव है, तो इसको करने में एक्चुअली गलत क्या है? जो व्यक्ति अपने आप को परमार्थी कह रहा है और वो दो रेसेस के बीच में बंधुत्व की भावना को बढ़ाने के लिए एक माध्यम की तलाश कर रहा है, और उसके लिए ये माध्यम एंग्लो इंडियन सोसाइटी के, जिसका बेसिस ही विश्व बंधुत्व है, जिसका उद्देश्य ये है कि ये जो ब्रिटिशर्स हैं वो कुछ लोकल लोगों के साथ संपर्क में आएंगे, लोग उनमें एक मित्रता भाईचारे का भाव बढ़ेगा, और धीरे धीरे वो मोमेंटम ग्रहण करेगा, वे संवेग ग्रहण करेगा, और चीजें थोड़ा सही दिशा में जाएंगी। तो उसको आप कह रहे हैं कि ये सब झूठ है। लेकिन वास्तव में आप जो चाहते हैं वो केवल सेल्फ अप्रूवल, यानी आप मैं जिसे कहते हैं कि मैं ही सही हूं, जैसे रावण कहता था, रावण का जो अहंकार था कि द्वितीयो नास्ति न भूतो न भविष्यति, तो उस तरीके का एक जो कैरेक्टर है वो बता रहे हैं। और महात्मा ये भी कह रहे हैं कि आप इस बात को बिल्कुल गलत समझे कि हमने आपको एंग्लो इंडियन सोसाइटी में कैसे एसोटेरिक या गुप्त विद्या का अध्ययन होगा ये प्लान करने के लिए कहा। ये तो आपने बिल्कुल ही गलत समझा, क्योंकि हमने तो आपको केवल उसका एक जो एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव ढांचा है वो बनाने के लिए कहा था, ना कि उसमें कैसे और क्या पढ़ाया जाएगा इस बारे का कोई प्लान बनाने के लिए। और ये एपी सिनेट जो है वो बहुत आसानी से समझ गए थे, लेकिन आप अपने इस प्री कंडीशनिंग पूर्वाग्रहों के कारण नहीं समझ सके, और ये केवल आपको इसलिए कहा गया था क्योंकि you English people are far more competent than we to draft a general plan, he says very clearly। और आपने अपने लेटर में लिखा कि इस गहन ज्ञान को पचाने का जो कार्य है वो 10,000 में से एक भी ऐसा यहाँ पे लोकल कोई मस्तिष्क नहीं है जो इस ज्ञान को पचा सके, जितना कि मेरा मस्तिष्क है इसको रिसीव करने के लिए, यानी ह्यूम का। लेकिन महात्मा इस बात को क्लैरिफाई करते हैं कि जो इंग्लिश मैन हैं, विज्ञान के जो साइंटिस्ट हैं, वैज्ञानिक हैं, उनमें से आधा दर्जन लोग भी ऐसे नहीं होंगे जो इस गुप्त विद्या के बेसिक ज्ञान को भी ग्रहण कर सकें। और जो हिंदू मन है वो इस तरीके के गहन कॉम्प्लेक्स और परा ज्ञान को, परा विद्या को, मेटाफिजिकल सत्यों को समझने के लिए ज्यादा ओपन है और तैयार है। हिंदू माइंड नॉट एज अ पर्टिकुलर रिलीजन, बट हम लोग कोई भी मन जो इसमें पूर्वाग्रह कम है, जो यूनिटी इन डाइवर्सिटी देख पाता है, जो बाहरी चीजों से उतना प्रभावित नहीं होता है जितना कि चीजों के सत्व से, वो इस प्रकार का मन इस प्रकार के ज्ञान को आसानी से रिसीव कर सकता है। और यहाँ तक कि यहाँ पे ऐसे भी लोग हैं जो बिल्कुल ही पढ़े लिखे नहीं हैं, लेकिन वो भी आपके किसी वेस्टर्न मेटाफिजिशियन से ज्यादा किसी भी चीज को, किसी तथ्य को बहुत आसानी से समझ सकते हैं। और मुझे यहाँ याद नहीं आ रहा, एक राम एक संत हुए हैं, नाम उनका भूल गया, मानव सेवा संस्थान के शायद उन्होंने शुरू किया था। तो वो ब्लाइंड थे और मतलब रियलाइज्ड थे, बिल्कुल पढ़े लिखे नहीं थे, और उनको कहीं किसी इंडियन वैज्ञानिकों की एक सभा में बोलने के लिए बुलाया गया। वो जय कृष्णमूर्ति से भी उनका वार्तालाप हुआ है। तो उन लोगों ने सोचा ये क्या बोलेंगे, और उन्होंने जो विज्ञान पे जो टॉक दी है, एटम्स, और उस समय बहुत पुराने समय में, तो लोग बिल्कुल अचंभित थे कि इन्हें ये सब कैसे मालूम। तो यही अंतर है मन के द्वारा ज्ञान प्राप्त करने में, या मन के द्वारा इंफॉर्मेशन प्राप्त करने में, और अंतः प्रज्ञा द्वारा ज्ञान प्राप्त करने में। और इसीलिए महात्मा कहते हैं कि भले ही जो आपकी रेस है वो फिजिकल नॉलेज में सुपीरियर है, लेकिन जो आध्यात्मिक विज्ञान है, वो पूर्वी विज्ञान जो है, वो हमेशा से लोगों को सिखाता रहा है, गुरु रहा है, वो रहेगा। और साथ में शायद ह्यूम ने ये भी कहा था कि ये जो ज्ञान है, आप अगर आप बिल्कुल ऐसे लोग चाहते हैं जो आंखें बंद करके आपके पीछे चलें, तो आप अपने ऑलकॉट और इन सब के साथ लगे रहिए। लेकिन अगर आपको हायर क्लास के लोग चाहिए, तो आपको हमें लेना पड़ेगा। तो महात्मा इस बात को भी क्लैरिफाई करते हैं कि हमें ऐसे लोग नहीं चाहिए, हम अपने ऐसे मित्रों को नहीं छोड़ सकते जो भले ही दूसरों की नजर में बेवकूफ लगे, लेकिन वास्तव में वो एक प्लेज में है, वो एक ओथ के अंदर है। उन्होंने एक प्रतिज्ञा ली है कि वो अपने द्वारा सीखी गई चीजों को सबके सामने शेयर नहीं करेंगे जब तक कि उन्हें परमिशन नहीं मिल जाती, भले ही लोग उन्हें कुछ भी कहें। भले ही हायर क्लास के लोग हमारे पास आए चाहे ना आए, लेकिन हमें इससे कोई खास फर्क नहीं पड़ता। हमें ऐसे लोग चाहिए जिनके पास निस्वार्थ हृदय हो, सत्य हृदय हो, सच्चाई हो, जो निर्भय हो, और जिनको चीजें कही जा सकें और उस बात को रख सकें अपने पर। और उनके लिए हम हायर क्लास के लोगों को छोड़ने के लिए भी तैयार हैं। वो अब जाने अपना काम, अंधेरे में जैसे भी ज्ञान को सर्च करें, क्योंकि ऐसे लोग अपने ईगो के कारण हमें हमेशा अपना जो सबऑर्डिनेट समझेंगे, अपने से नीचे समझेंगे। तो इन सब चीजों के द्वारा महात्मा कहते हैं, अब आपको समझ ही आ गया होगा कि आपने ये जो सब लिखा है, तो उससे हमारे और आपके बीच का जो संबंध है वो मैत्रीपूर्ण तो कम से कम नहीं है। और आपने अपने लेटर में ये भी कहा कि एंड करते हुए कि एंड में कुछ टॉन्ट, जिन्हें उन्होंने पार्थियन एरो कहा है। पार्थियन एरो का मतलब, जैसे कोई भी आर्ग्यूमेंट या लड़ाई चल रही है, तो जाते जाते भी व्यक्ति कुछ कह जाता है, या जाते जाते भी घुड़सवार दौड़ रहा है, वो पीछे मुड़ के अपना तीर चला जाता है। तो महात्मा कहते हैं ऐसा कुछ नहीं है। एक्चुअली आपके लिए चिड़ियों का अध्ययन करना एक महत्वपूर्ण चीज है। तो उसमें हम ये नहीं कह रहे कि वो बहुत छोटी चीज है, लेकिन साथ ही साथ मनुष्य जाति का अध्ययन करना, मनुष्य मन का अध्ययन करना, वो भी एक नोबल स्टडी है। और इसीलिए ऐसा कुछ नहीं है कि आप उसको हमारे ऊपर टॉन्ट कर रहे हैं कि हमने ऐसा कहा। लेकिन अगर आप कुछ सोचना चाहते हैं तो सोचें, हमें इससे कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता, क्योंकि हम जहाँ हैं हम संतोष से हैं। भले ही कोई हमें जाने ना जाने, स्पेशली एक ऐसा सिविलाइजेशन, एक ऐसी सभ्यता जो पूरी तरीके से मन पे आधारित है, इंटेलेक्ट पे आधारित है। ना ही हम अपनी ज्ञान और आर्ट्स को, प्राचीन ज्ञान को सामने लाने के लिए बहुत कोई आतुर है, क्योंकि ये अपने समय में आएंगे। क्योंकि हम प्रकृति की प्रकृति के जो साइकिल्स हैं, जो चक्र हैं, चक्र रूप में जो है वो बार बार प्रकृति में चलते हैं, समय के चक्र। और उसमें पुरानी पुरानी चीजें वर्तमान में आती हैं और एक नए रूप में आती हैं। हम उसको रोक भी नहीं सकते हैं, लेकिन कर्म के नियम के अनुसार हम उसको जल्दी लाने की या बेहतर तरीके से लाने की कोशिश कर सकते हैं। और उसमें ये जो ब्रह्म विद्या है, ये तो बिल्कुल ही सबसे ही प्रेशियस रेलिक है, यानी बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण अमूल्य गिफ्ट ऑफ द गॉड्स है। तो और इस गिफ्ट के जो कीपर्स हैं, जो संघ है, सिद्ध संघ है, वो इतने समय से इसलिए नहीं चला आ रहा है कि वो यहाँ आके कि अब एक बहुत ही इंटेलेक्चुअल डेवलपमेंट हो रहा है तो यहाँ आके खत्म हो जाएगा, नहीं। हमारे जो सीनियर्स हैं, जो सिद्ध संघ के सीनियर संत हैं, वो बहुत ही एक्सपीरियंस्ड हैं और उन्हें पूरी तरीके से मालूम है कि उन्हें कैसे या इसके थ्रू जाना है। क्योंकि हमें हमेशा इस संसार में लोग मिल जाएंगे जो हमारे पुराने जो द्वारपाल है उनको रिप्लेस करने के लिए तैयार रहेंगे। और भले ही विश्व इस समय एक ऐसे समय से गुजर रहा है, ट्रांजिट पीरियड से, लेकिन हमें हमेशा कुछ ना कुछ वॉलेंटियर्स, कुछ ना कुछ दीवाने लोग जो हैं वो मिल जाते हैं जो इस दिशा में काम करते हैं। वो चाहे HPB हो, कर्नल ऑलकॉट हो, एनी बेसेंट हो, या कोई भी व्यक्ति हो जो इस दिशा में कार्य कर रहा हो। तो इसलिए हमने तो अपना ड्यूटी कर दिया है, आपके प्रश्नों का उत्तर भी दिया है। अब इसके आगे हम कोई स्टेप नहीं लेने जा रहे हैं। और आप कैंट के मॉरल टीचिंग्स की बात करते हैं जिनका प्रभाव आपके पूरे पत्र में है, तो मैं ये भी कहना चाहूंगा कि कैंट की भी जो नैतिक शिक्षाएं हैं वो बेसिकली उनमें वैश्विकता का जो भाव है उसका अभाव है। और इसीलिए शायद ये जो फिलैंथ्रोपिक यानी निस्वार्थता, परोपकारिता की जो फीलिंग है, अगर आप अपने को इतने ही परोपकारी समझते हैं तो आपकी परोपकारिता जो है वो आपसे निम्न स्तर वाले लोगों तक आकर रुक क्यों जाती है? वो आप ही के जाति या आप ही के धर्म के लोगों तक ही क्यों सीमित है? क्यों? क्योंकि उसमें वैश्विकता का भाव नहीं है। और जिसको हम निस्वार्थ प्रेम कहते हैं, आपके लिए वो एक एक्सीडेंट है, एक एक्सेप्शन है। और यही कारण है, यही गुप्त एक रहस्य है इस वर्तमान समय के आध्यात्मिक फेलियर का, which is failure and unconscious egotism of this age। क्योंकि हमारा जो प्रेम भी है वो सीमित है, वो स्वार्थी है, और वो हम केवल अपने ही लोगों तक उसको रखते हैं। और जैसे ही हमारे सर्कल के बाहर जाती हैं चीजें, हम बिल्कुल ही एक अलग व्यक्ति बन जाते हैं। और भले ही आप एक अच्छे और प्रज्ञावान व्यक्ति हैं, लेकिन आपके अंदर भी ये सारी विशेषताएं पूरी तरीके से मौजूद हैं। और भले ही आपकी ये जो अंतः चेतना है, कॉन्शियस है, वो कहेगी कि मैं आप कुछ लोग ऐसे जो लोग दिखाई नहीं देते हैं उनके महत्व की कठपुतली नहीं बनना चाहता इस कार्य को करके, लेकिन आप हमें क्या जानते हैं, आप हमारे उद्देश्यों को समझते हैं। भले ही हम आपके सामने भी आके खड़े हो जाएं तो भी आप हमें नहीं पहचान पाएंगे, क्योंकि आपकी जो विल पावर है उसको बहुत आसानी से कंट्रोल किया जा सकता है। और आपके जो बहुत ही विद्वान लोग हैं वो भी किसी जो बहरूपीय लोग होते हैं यहाँ पे, उन तक को आप नहीं पहचान पाएंगे कि वो एक एडेप्ट है कि वो बहरूपिया है। और इसका उदाहरण देते हुए महात्मा कहते हैं कि जो ब्रूच इंसिडेंट या फिनोमेना हुआ था, आपको अभी लगता है कि उसका केवल एकमात्र रीजन यही है कि किसी ने अपनी विल पावर का यूज करके मिसेस ह्यूम के मन में पहले ही ये थॉट डाल दिया कि वो ब्रूच के बारे में सोचें। तो अगर HP भी ऐसा काम कर सकती है, तो सोचिए मैं जिसकी विल पावर HPV की तुलना में कितनी ज्यादा गुना है, अधिक है, क्या वो नहीं कर सकते? हम आपके घर में आके रुक सकते हैं और पूरी तरीके से आपके मन और शरीर पर कंट्रोल कर सकते हैं और आपको उसका कुछ भान भी नहीं होगा। भले ही मैं एक अच्छा व्यक्ति हूं, लेकिन हो सकता है कोई दूसरा व्यक्ति ऐसा करे जो कि आपसे इस जाति भेद और भेदभाव जो ब्रिटिशर्स भारतीयों के साथ करते हैं उसका रिवेंज लेने के लिए, बदला लेने के लिए। इसीलिए ये जो मेस्मेरिज्म की शक्ति है, एक्सोटेरिक मेस्मेरिज्म, इसका आध्यात्मिकता से कोई लेना देना नहीं है। और आप इसके लिए एक बहुत ही आसान टारगेट हैं, जैसा कि मैंने आपको जाना है। और ऐसे में आपकी कॉन्शियस, अंतः चेतना या और आपकी इंट्यूशन आपकी कुछ मदद नहीं करेगी, क्योंकि जो कॉन्शियस है वो आपको क्या नहीं करना है ये तो बताती है, लेकिन क्या करना है ये नहीं बताती है। और आपकी कॉन्शियस पे बहुत ही आसानी से कोई भी ऐसा व्यक्ति प्रभाव डाल सकता है जिसकी विल पावर स्ट्रांग हो। और इसीलिए इसीलिए जो आपकी कॉन्शियस है वो कभी आपको ये नहीं बताएगी कि आपके सामने जो है वो एक बहरूपिया है, मेस्मराइजर है, या कोई वास्तव में सिद्ध व्यक्ति है, या कोई फेक व्यक्ति है। अगर वो एक बार आपके ऑरा से पास होके निकल गया है और आपके ऑरा पे कंट्रोल कर लिया है, तो इसीलिए वो कह रहे हैं कि आप कहते हैं कि आप बर्ड कलेक्टिंग जैसे निर्दोष कार्य से को छोड़ने के लिए राजी नहीं है, unless there be a danger of creating another Frankenstein monster। Frankenstein monster की एक कहानी है, एक रेफरेंस है, लेकिन उसमें अभी हम लोग नहीं जाएंगे। लेकिन महात्मा कह रहे हैं कि जो हमारी कल्पना है और विल पावर है वो दोनों ही क्रिएट में क्रिया शक्ति है, वो क्रिएट करती है। और हमारा जो सस्पिशन है, यानी डाउट, सस्पिशन है, संदेह है, वो बहुत ही पावरफुल और प्रोवोकेटिव एजेंट ऑफ इमेजिनेशन है। जब भी हम कुछ चिंता करते हैं, वेरी करते हैं, संदेह करते हैं, तो आप देखिए किस तरीके के सब नेगेटिव थॉट्स और सब कहानियां और पूरा सब वो खड़ा हो जाता है। तो महात्मा कह रहे हैं उससे सावधान रहिए, क्योंकि आपके अंदर इस तरीके के बीज हैं जो कि आपको एक बहुत ही भविष्य में एक महादैत्य बना सकते हैं रूपक के फॉर्म में, और अपने हाईएस्ट और पवित्रतम आइडियल्स को रियलाइज करने के बदले आप एक भूत को जागृत कर देंगे, और फिर आप अपने चारों ओर एक कैद खाना बना लेंगे जिससे आपके पास कोई भी प्रकाश की किरण नहीं आ पाएगी, और अंत में आप उसी अंधकार के द्वारा प्रताड़ित किए जाएंगे। तो इस प्रकार की चीजों को महात्मा कहते हैं कि आप इससे सावधान रहें कि ये आप स्वयं ही अपने दुश्मन बन रहे हैं। और इसी के साथ महात्मा जो है वो इस लेटर का अंत करते हैं। थैंक यू।
Shikhar ji, thank you very much for explaining this letter to us in English as well as in Hindi. And if there are any questions or somebody would like to discuss some point, you may please unmute yourself and speak now.
Shikhar ji, there is a sentence, of course, it is relating to science. There are many students today join who are basically science students, like Brother Dhruv Prasad Panda. The question here is Mahatma mentioned regarding abstruse problem regarding the motion of a fluid inside another fluid. Can you explain it a little? Why he mentioned fluid inside another fluid?
Okay, this I think it is a scientific thing. See, it's most likely it is related to fluid mechanics. When we used to study physics for IIT preparation or something, so there used to be various questions in physics, like questions related to springs or various things. So similarly, there is, fluid mechanics, the motion and movement of fluid. So if there is only one fluid, you can easily calculate the movement and motion and effect of the forces on that fluid. But suppose you mix two fluids of different densities, then it will be even more complex to solve that problem. Are you getting my point?
Yes.
So if suppose if it is a very simple system that you say that there is a box, then you push it with so much force, how much distance it will go. So you can calculate force is equal to ma, the push and acceleration, and you can easily calculate, right? But suppose you say, no, on the opposite side, there is a spring attached to the box. Then when you press with so much force, how much distance? So the problem becomes complex. So what actually A.O. Hume wrote to the Mahatma in his own letter, when Mahatma asked him to draw a draft of the Anglo-India society, so he thought that they are asking him to draw the plan of esoteric study. So he gave an example that you are asking a boy who does not know much or who is a beginner to solve a problem of fluid in the fluid. That is a very complex problem. It's like I am in class 7th or 8th, and you give me a problem to solve of calculus or higher calculus or something trigonometry. It is beyond my level. That's what A.O. Hume might have written in his letter, I think. But I think, yeah, this is a very good study of understanding ourselves, because I think many of us might have all these things going on in the mind. We are prone to selfishness, prone to all these things. So these are like reminders to check ourselves, observe ourselves continuously, what's going on in the mind.
Yes, today we have a how Mahatma. Yes, Sampaji is like to ask. Sampaji, unmute kariye. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Sorry, I wanted to ask you about this A.O. Hume and A P Sinnet. They were two good friends, very, very good friends. Master Kutubi can realize that Hume is very egoist. Yeah, we read through the letters and we find out that he is very egoist. Couldn't Sinnet see that he was a very egoist? Like Sinnet was not egoist at all. He was a journalist, and he had some humility in him. Do you know anything about it? Why he couldn't see it?
I think that's why if you read the letter number 10, the letter number 10 is written to Mr. A P Sinnet, because his attitude was completely different. So Mahatma he asked simply questions, and that was the beginning. But this letter number 11 was enclosed with letter number 10 for Mr. A.O. Hume, because he was a completely different character with, as you said, so much of egoism. And in this letter, Mahatma has said that he considered him to be the law, one and only, first and last, everything. But that is the thing, I think, what Mahatmas can see, you and me cannot see. I will think that this is my friend and a very good person. He is helping the poor. He is doing such and such social work, doing study of very high intellect. We judge people like that. But for Mahatma, that is not the judge benchmark. They have very clearly mentioned in this letter that being of high class or doing social work or good work is not the thing. What they really want of what he said, pure and unselfish hearts, confiding souls, and basically people who are with humility, who are willing to learn, not just who want to say that they know everything and they want to dictate the rules and regulations. So, but it's very difficult. Even after so many things, A P Sinnet, it took some time for him to understand. And if you see the letters, Mahatmas have given him proofs, one after the another, that we told you this will happen, we told you this will happen regarding the Mr. A.O. Hume, or for regarding many other people. So I think as a human at our level, we judge by superficial actions. But Mahatmas know the past, present, future, from where even the slightest word we say, don't know the motive of it. So I think Maybe AP Sinnet saw later, but not at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vivaji, you can add.
Sorry?
Sir, I have nothing to add, but if anyone has any other point to say,
No.
okay. So I think with this we conclude a very important letter, and it was quite long also. And Shikharji, thanks to you, you were managed to complete it in 2 sessions. So that was really good, very nicely explained. So Sir Pradeepji, I think then we can conclude the session.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So please join me in the closing prayer. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Sarvesham Swastirabhavatu Sarvesham Shantirabhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Lokaha Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukhabhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Shikharji. Thank you, each and everyone.
Thank you. Namaskar. Good night.
Thank you. Namaskar. Bye bye.
Everybody.